Hello everyone, my name is Wambui Bahati. Welcome to 70 Years and Beyond. Today, I'm going to talk about my name and we're going to get that out of the way. I was born in Greensboro, North Carolina in 1950. However, my legal name is Wambui Bahati, which is a Swahili name. And Wambui means singer of songs. Bahati means my fortune is good. So not only on the channel, but in my day-to-day life, people often ask me, well, is that your legal name? Is that your real name? Well, I'll say my name is Wambui Bahati, and they say, well, what's your real name? And Wambui Bahati is my real name. Now, I started out with a real birth name that was not Wambui Bahati. Okay, I was born to Eva Davis. I better say it how she would want me to say it. Eva Athenia Davis Washington. My mother, who was married to John Lewis Washington. I was the second child that they would have. And my mother predicted, she thought she could do that. My mother predicted that I would be a boy, and she also predicted that I was going to be her last child. So my mother decided that since I was going to be a boy and the last boy in the family, or the last child in the family, she was going to name me after my father. So my mother had decided that my name would be John Lewis Washington Jr. So on the day that I was born, the hospital staff revealed to my mother that she had given birth to a baby girl. And so my mother, being one to never admit that she was wrong, because she was so sure about this prediction that I was going to be a boy, not only would I be a boy, but I would be the last child in the family, that she was hard to admit that she was wrong. She didn't have another name picked out. And so my mother went ahead and named me John, John, after my father. She did change the middle name at the last minute to Ann, A-N-N. So on my original birth certificate, it says that my birth name is John, John, middle name Ann, A-N-N, last name Washington. Okay, so when I started school around 1956, and there's when I would be 6 or 7 years old, 1956, 1957. My name was spelled John, and so the children used to tease me about having a boy's name. And it hurt. And so my mother would go to school, had to go to school, and she told the teachers, okay, look, here's what we're going to do. Her middle name is Ann. Just call her Ann. Her name is still John Ann Washington, but if you could, so that the kids don't tease her and that she doesn't feel bad, because I was one of those children that would cry if you just looked at me the wrong way. I was always crying. That's a whole nother story. I was just always crying as a child. Anything would make me cry. And so my mother went to school and she said, okay, just call her Ann. When you call the roll, we know you know her as John Ann Washington. That's what the records say, and that's what the paperwork says. But if you could, when you get to her name, just say Ann Washington. And so that's what they did. When I was in elementary school, I became known as Ann. My family called me Ann, and all of my classmates just knew me as Ann. And I was happy and didn't cry so much anymore, and my mother was happy. When I moved to we didn't have middle school. We had elementary, junior high, and high school. So then when I moved to junior high, the teachers, I'm older now, so I should be able to not have to play. My mother shouldn't have to come to school when I'm in 7th and 8th and 9th grade and say, just call her Ann so that she won't cry. So it was in junior high school that people started calling me John Ann. In fact, it was in junior high school that a lot of people even realized that my name was John Ann. And so John Ann became my name. I got used to it. No one was busy laughing and picking on me because I had a boy's name. And so at that time, I started thinking, well, this is pretty cool. I have a very unique name. And so that went on through junior high and then high school. Of course, I was John Ann. And so I was just known as John Ann Washington. And I got used to it, and that was my name. And like I said, in a lot of ways, I just thought it was unique. I do know that I'd get mail from different places. I believe my family was sent a draft letter, a notice. They weren't drafting, but it was a notice to me about me because my name was John. Back in those days, the names were not fluid so much. I mean, heard names of Billy Sue and Johnny May and things like that, but for the most part, if your name was John, it was assumed that it was a guy's name. And so I was always questioning about that name, and sometimes it did cause confusion because it was assumed that this must be a male because the name is John. And even when I went to college, there was some question about which dorm I should be in, because my name was John, and so they didn't know if the name was a mistake or the tick female male was a mistake. And so it was at the last minute when they decided where I should go, when they saw that I did present as a girl. So I was given a female roommate. And her name happened to have been Benny. I kid you not, her name was Benny. Anyway, so we became roommates, John and Benny. I liked my name when I started doing theater. I, after a while, started putting a hyphen between the John and the Ann. And I know this sounds really silly and ridiculous, and there is no understanding as to why this would be, but I put a hyphen between the John and the Ann because I thought it made it look French. I thought it made it look French. So John Ann Washington. So that was my working name when I started out as an actress, John Ann Washington. And even to this day, on a lot of those sites online that talk about different shows and who the performers were in the shows, I noticed that in a lot of shows that I was in, some of the Godspells, the Wiz tours, and Don't Bother Me, I Can't Cope. A lot of those tours don't have my name. When I go to the website, I'm not listed at all. I've seen sometimes where the character that I was, they just leave that blank. And then sometimes there's another actress whose last name is Washington is actually given credit for having done the roles that I've done. But because I believe the name was causing so much confusion, and they say, well, we know it was a female that played the role. She was really a female. I saw her, I know her, but I don't know her name, but I don't think her name would be John, so they think it's a mistake, and so they just don't put anything. How did I end up with Wambui Bahati? My life took on a life of its own, and my life at a certain point, which I will get into details with about my life in another video, but let's just say my life went off the rails. Let's just say my mind was gone. I was gone. I ended up broken financially, mentally, physically, spiritually. Any way that you could be broken, I ended up broken in that way. I spent a lot of time in the mental health system as an adult, as a young adult. Starting when I was just 20 and going to all the way up. I think I finally left the mental health system. They didn't let me go, but I left the mental health system. I was about, I want to say 40, about 47, 48 in there is when I left the system. But I had been in the mental health system for many years of my life. Now, it didn't interfere so much with my doing theater because theater was my lifeline. That was the thing that I did in order to remain the little bit of sanity that I had, is I needed to perform. But I was in the mental health system for many years. Long story short, when I walked away, and I did walk away, like I say, they didn't release me. I released myself. I mean, I was even given Social Security for disability. I was told my life was pretty much over, that nothing was ever going to change. And it was around 1996 where they had decided, your life is over. Just prepare that if you're not going to be in a mental institution for the rest of your life, you will be in the mental health system, and you will be in and out of mental institutions for the rest of your life because we don't know how to fix you. Well, I stumbled across some things. Again, it would just take a really long time for me to explain everything in this video. I just want to really share why I have the name, and I'll get into details in future videos. But I was eventually I left the mental health system. They told me that I would be back. They told me, you're making a mistake. But at this time when I left, I had a plan, and I pretty much changed everything. I changed how I thought, how I perceived things. I changed my way of talking. I changed my way of eating. I just changed I was changed. And the only thing that wasn't changed at a certain point was my name. When I decided I was going to change my name, it was because I was feeling better. I was feeling brand new. I was feeling reborn, but I wasn't yet at the place where I knew that I didn't have to change my name to be reborn if I came through Christ, but I wasn't there yet. So I thought, well, I feel reborn, so I want a new name. I want a new everything. I have a new attitude, as Patti LaBelle had said, and now I wanted a new name. And so I looked through books, and I talked to people, and I said, what name do you think I should choose? And so the first thing was, I knew that I didn't want a name that was so difficult, because I've had friends who had changed their names for other reasons, or the reasons because they wanted to feel closer to their African roots, so they were adopting an African name. And I wanted the name to be African, but I wanted it to be a name that people would be kind of easy to remember. And I wanted it to mean something that was really special to me. I finally settled on the name Wambui. And then I thought, well, I can't be Wambui, Washington. That's not good. And so I said, well, okay, if I'm choosing Wambui, I should choose a second name too, and just have two Swahili names. So I was told and understood, and also read for myself, in that Wambui is Swahili for singer of songs. And then I thought, Wambui, that's pretty easy to say. Nobody's going to remember it, but it's easy to say. Wambui, it's not so many syllables and so many words that sound differently. And it's just like it's spelled. Wambui. Wambui. Singer of songs. And I thought, okay, that's great, but I can't be Washington. Let's get a last name. And so again, I was told and read that Bahati means my fortune is good. And I thought, aha, I love it. Wambui Bahati. And I loved the way it flowed, and I loved the meaning. Singer of songs, my fortune is good. And God knows I really needed good fortune at that time. And so I love the name, and so I wanted to change the name legally. This is where my family, especially my mother, assumed that I was having another mental break, because I announced I'm going to change my name to Wambui Bahati, and my mother just thought, oh Lord, what are we going to do with her? But then my mother assured my older sister, oh, and by the way, there were two younger brothers that came after me. My mother assured my siblings that it was going to be okay, because in order for me to legally change my name, I would need a lawyer, which means I'm going to need some sums of money. And at that particular time, I didn't have those sums of money that were needed to get a lawyer. And so I was determined to investigate how this would work. So I went down to my county courthouse at that time in Greensboro, North Carolina. I was living back there at this time. I went to the courthouse and I went to somebody and I said, I want to change my name. And they told me where to go who to see in the court for a name change. They didn't even mention a lawyer. They said it's going to be a $35 fee. And I'm thinking, I got that. I got $35. And they said, if you go in the library, ask the librarian or the person that was working in the Guilford County Library or the room with all the copies of contracts and things. They said they'll show you the paperwork that you're going to need to fill out. Now, the idea was that the paperwork needed to be filled out by a lawyer. First of all, getting the paperwork was half the battle. I found out not only for this, but another case I found out too, that if you can just get the form is easy enough to fill out, but a lot of times you need a lawyer in order to get the form. So I don't know what happened that day. My angels were with me or whatever, but they just said, go in there and you can see the form you need. And when I went in there, I said, yeah, I'm changing my name. And somebody in there showed me the form and they said, do you know how to fill this out? And I said, I think so. And they said, well, let me help you. And so they went ahead and filled out the form for me and told me, now you need to take this with $35 back to the desk and they'll tell you what to do next. And so I took the form with the $35 back and I said, here's the form. And they said, oh, great. They looked, they checked. They said, okay, this is good. And they said, well, we're going to have to post something on the board for 30 days for my creditors or for whoever might be interested in knowing who might be changing their name. So she said, come back in 30 days. And if everything is good, we will issue you a new birth certificate at that time. I went home, I waited for 30 days, and I went back, and then they issued me a new birth certificate with the name Wambui Bahati on that birth certificate. I don't think my mother ever forgave me for that and I understand as a mother myself, because I have a daughter who changed her name and it hurts because you named your daughter what you wanted to name them and so they go and change their name. So I get it. And but my mother, it was Wambui Bahati was not an easy name for her to say or to even remember. At one point, I wrote it down on a card for her so she could take it in her purse with her and know my name. But to this day, I don't think she wasn't happy about that. And now I understand, but I told her she didn't have to call me that. And she would say, why are you changing? I said, it's just I wanted a name that means something to me. But, I think she still called me Anne for the most part. It was only when, for instance, if she was trying to visit me in a hospital or do something like that, then a lot of times you need to know the person's name in order to get access to them, especially if they are in a mental health facility. One thing, too, to keep in mind is that this happened before 9/11. I believe everything is more difficult to do. Now, changing a name, I don't think is as easy as it was before 9/11. But that is my name now. My name is Wambui Bahati. I love the name. I love how it sounds. I know that a lot of people don't remember because it's an unusual name. And so I let them know, hey, when we introduce each other, I say, if you need to ask me my name again, I get it. So don't hesitate to ask me. My name is Wambui. And a lot of times when I meet somebody that I've met before, to make it easier for them, I say, hi, Wambui, and sometimes they say, oh, I remember. And sometimes they say, thank you. But I know, I don't hold that. It's a name. It's not who I am. It is a way of identifying me and calling me something that's good. So that's the story of how I went from John and Washington to Wambui Bahati.